All right, everybody. Well, we are here. Welcome once again to the Rec Poker Podcast, simulcast on Facebook Live. This is episode 158. And our guest is Ryan Laplante, which we're super excited about. I know a lot of you guys are excited about. He's in the mini window right now, waving at you all. But we'll blow him up a little bit later. And also, Jim Reed has joined us. Hey, Jim, welcome. Jim from Canada with the Pittsburgh hat on. So we're going to still let that go. He said to just get used to it. So we're going to get used to it. But just a couple of housekeeping things before we get into the conversation with Ryan. As always, we are sponsored by Running Aces Racetrack and Casino. And we also last week welcomed Learn Pro Poker as one of our sponsors. So Pretty good timing with that deal, as you see the hat that Ryan is showing off. Players of the week at Running Aces. As always, we talk about this, the four people that are picking up some bonus lammers for their performance last week. Brandon Kelsenberg. All right, I'll say it. Fly, Eagles, fly. That's for you, Brandon. Ray Dickerson, Robert Carl, and Randall Prokowitz. Congrats, guys, on that deal. A couple of binks by our members. Cheyenne Bhattacharya won the $50 at Canterbury on November 29th. And just today, I actually missed it, and it was pointed out to me, but Ben Gers picked up the $35 tournament at Canterbury. So nice job to you guys for the binks. A couple of other announcements. This Wednesday, as you guys know, we're going to be doing our next hand history discussion that Chris Jones is leading. That's at 6:30 p.m. Central Time. Members are welcome to join in on that conversation, and then we'll record that and put that out to our members as well. And our much looked forward to Poker Stars home game, our monthly home game. I see Bluff Storini there smiling in the background. December 4th, that's Wednesday, 8 o'clock p.m. Central. We do a Poker Stars free home game. Anybody's welcome to participate in that deal. You can go to rec.poker, get all the information there. Maria Ho, December 16th, she'll be on. Hopefully we'll be able to lock her in for that date. She has confirmed, so that'll be an exciting conversation as well. And then an update on our NFL Survivor pool. We lost 2 people, which means we're down to 3, and those are the folks that get to win the prizes. So congrats to Kevin Kelsenberg, Alejandro Casas, and Tim Carroll for picking up the prizes. But they're going to play it out, man. They're going to play it out and see who our champion is at the end of the year. But just a ton of ways to connect. So please check out rec.poker for everything we have going on. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions at all. And with all of that goodness, that's just leading into our main story here, which is Ryan Laplante is with us. So Ryan, first of all, man, thanks for jumping on here.
Thanks for having me on. I really do appreciate it. It's great to do this partnership with you guys, and it's great to be able to do this interview, explain, to your viewers a bit about me. I mean, you guys are based mostly out of Minnesota, right? So
we are,
I guess some of your viewers might know who I am through my poker results, having grown up in central Minnesota. Played at Canterbury, played at Running Aces back in the day. So I might be somewhat well known to your specific viewers, but still good to do this, and I really do appreciate being on.
Absolutely. Now, you were born in Brainerd, right? Is that what at least that's what it's on?
So I grew up in Brainerd. I was actually born in Madison, Wisconsin, and then we moved to Royalton, Minnesota when I was, I'm going to say 5. We lived there for 2 years, lived in Little Falls for about a year, and then we moved to Brainerd, and I essentially lived in Brainerd from 8 to 18, and then went to college at University of Minnesota Duluth for about a year. And then after Black Friday, essentially moved back and forth between Canada, Mexico, and Vegas in the Midwest for 5 to 6 years. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, settled down in Las Vegas.
Okay. And you're a young guy, right? You're like 30 or so. Is that right?
29.
29, not even 30 yet. Oh my goodness. And Royalton now I've gone through Royalton. Isn't that like kind of a quote unquote suburb of Little Falls kind of thing?
Royalton has like 900 people. Yeah, it's very small. It's like 15, 20 minutes south of Little Falls. And then Little Falls is like, I don't know, maybe 10 to 15,000 people, somewhere in that range. It's been a long time since I've actually been there. Like been there.
Well, awesome. Well, for those of you who don't know Ryan, so there is a Minnesota connection, but Jim, for example, is up in Canada. So there's plenty of folks around here that aren't from Minnesota. But if you don't know Ryan, you should. This guy, so he's not even 30. And I was looking up your Hand and Mob. I know you've had a ton of results, but I looked it up. I'm like, oh my God. Yeah. Like this guy's not even 30. And I know Hand and Mob isn't the whoosness of the muchness. It's not everything. But reported on there, you got 2.4 million in live earnings, another 1.8 million in online earnings. The live earnings include 54 World Series cashes, including 11 last summer. about 1.1 million in World Series earnings. I looked at some of your big scores. Obviously, the one that most people know about, if they know of your career at all, is the 2016 bracelet.
Yep.
So you won the PLO bracelet. You also had a runner up the next year in the 1500 no limit hold'em PLO 8-handed. So 190K in 2016, 166K in 2017. And then your latest one, and I'm not really telling you this because you don't know this, but I think our listeners want to know. So actually, just like 4 weeks ago, you won the PLO Poker Masters 10K buy-in for 186K. So a lot of success at a young age. And I mean, you're just kind of the real deal. And I want to start kind of with the World Series of Poker bracelet. I know you probably talked ad nauseum about this, but one of the things I want to touch on, in case our viewers don't know this, is you were like 26 years old at the time.
Yep.
And, you know, based on the reports, you weren't planning on giving a speech at all.
Yeah.
And then the Orlando shooting occurred.
Yeah.
And you changed your mind and you gave this speech that it's not even 2 minutes long, but it was just incredibly compelling. And, you know, you were challenging us to treat each other with love and respect. And where I kind of want to start with that is, now that 3 years have gone by, you know, and that's sort of, it's, you know, it's a big part of your career, a big part of your story, but it's 3 years ago. Kind of I'd like to know kind of what's really sticking with you out of that experience of, you know, playing it, winning the bracelet, the you know, the talk you gave and your acceptance. Kind of what's still there for you as far as the big memory?
I mean, it's still definitely very bittersweet, you know, having such an important, you know, part of my life. When I was, growing up in Brainerd and like doing chores and stuff for my parents, I dreamed of just playing in the World Series and winning a bracelet. And, you know, to achieve something like that was so wonderful and amazing. But then the exact same night to have, at the time, which still is one of the worst mass shootings in U.S. history, and occur in a, you know, gay nightclub in Orlando was absolutely devastating. You know, I've been openly gay, you know, since I came out in 18, at the age of 18, and I've been openly gay in poker the entire length of my career. And, you know, I think that it's important when you do have some type of platform to be able to use that to, you know, even minorly try to make the world a slightly better place. And while many Americans and Canadians might think that, you know, we've made a lot of progress with gay rights, which we certainly have, it is still an important thing to be open about and to be public about, because of how much discrimination that there still is in the USA and abroad. I mean, the USA, you can get fired for being openly gay in like 25 or 30 states. You know, it's still actually illegal to be gay in like 40 or 50 countries. It's death penalty in like 30 countries. And for a more local stat, something that might be a little bit surprising is, so right now in the US, if you look at the major sports, there's about 10,000 professional athletes across football, hockey, baseball, you know, across like the major basketball, across major sports, there's about 10,000 professionals. And statistically speaking, there should be at minimum 100 to 300 like openly GLBT players of some fashion of those sports. And there's currently zero, not one, which the reason why to me that is a very compelling stat is because it is something that people, even in this modern day and age, are still worried about how others perceive them and their sexuality, even if they are competing in something that is purely about their ability. It's about nothing else, just about how good of an athlete they are and what they can do for their team. Yet there's no one that's willing to be openly gay and be a player. And I guarantee you that there are many gay players across those sports. And the fact that there's no one that's willing to be out just shows how much fear there is among the GLBT community and how much discrimination that there is still publicly, even in countries like the USA and Canada. And while I'm very grateful for the amount of progress that we have made, you know, there being gay marriage federally legal in the US, you know, that gay people can now adopt kids in most states, that, you know, we have made a ton of progress, but that there is still, you know, so much more that needs to be done. And, you know, when I won my bracelet, I kind of view like the act of winning the bracelet by itself is enough, that it speaks for itself, that you don't need to like add anything to it. If you want to do like a minor thank you for, your friends and family for being supportive or something like that, I'm all in favor of that. And, I personally just wasn't that interested in doing something like that just because, they know how much I appreciate them and, for being supportive and that type of thing. But, the morning that I woke up after winning my bracelet, when I, saw what happened at the Pulse shooting, I knew that it was important for me to say, something. And that, even if me saying something only made, a difference to a single person, that to me that would be enough. And that is, worth saying something about. And, you know, obviously looking back at it, it still is a very cool accomplishment, but I will also always have the memory, tied to the Pulse shooting. Um, and especially also being less than a mile away from the Las Vegas shooting as well, having these types of things have such an impact on my life just makes me so much more aware of the impact that they have on society. And, being able to have a voice, to some degree, I am very thankful and grateful for, and will continue to do my best to, try to have a positive impact, even if it's only in, the poker world. I care deeply about the game and the industry and its long-term growth and impact. And I plan on continuing to do my best to be a positive influence in it.
That's so well said, and I think I just want to appreciate you for your courage on that. I'm sure it's not been an easy road, and I think whenever anybody, whatever the situation is, whenever anybody is somehow not able to be fully themselves, I just grieve. I think
Right.
a lot of us just grieve for that, no matter what the situation is, no matter what our beliefs are. And for you, especially in northern Minnesota, I'm sure that was very difficult.
Yeah, not
To
the
grow up in that
easiest.
situation. But you've come through that, and I'm sure not unscathed. But you're a voice for the people that need voice and
Mhm.
those sorts of things. And I appreciate your courage on that. And I want to encourage
Thank you.
anybody, whatever your situation is, whether it's similar to Ryan's or different, be
Mhm.
yourself. And as you challenged us, just love
Mhm.
and respect each other.
Right.
It's not that complicated. The
And
politics gets complicated, but loving and
yeah,
respecting each other isn't that
right.
complicated.
And that's one of the best things about poker, and honestly, in part, why I love the game so much. You know, for the most part, playing poker is just about having the money and willingness to sit down and play. Like the Poker Masters events, that I recently played it and did well in. There wasn't any barrier to entry outside of just, did you have the money and were you willing to? There's no other politics around it, no other who are you, what are you. It's just, you have the money, you buy in, you sit down and you play, and no one questions that. There's no, you know you name it in those events and you have it in terms of players and people. And especially when you're talking about something like the World Series, there is no barrier to entry there outside of just having the money and sitting down. And especially these days with buy-ins going even as low as like $365 all the way up to 1 million, it's a very accessible thing. And you get all walks of life winning and playing, and playing and even winning in these events. And the fact that it is just a very laissez-faire attitude about everything. Poker players, poker professionals, especially in general, are just a very open-minded and accepting group of people. And, the fact that they care more about just who you are as a competitor and who you are ethically as a person than anything says a lot about the industry and game as an overall whole. And I'm glad that that is still the focus of the game and the industry. And also in part why I kind of prefer tournaments to cash games. Cash games can be a little bit more of a aggressive and predatory and kind of political thing, especially these days as some of the higher stakes games that are maybe more privately focused. So with something like tournaments, just being able to plop down the money, sit down and grind, to me, that is it's a very cool thing and very unique to our age and industry to just be able to, if you want to work, you can just go there and play and battle and compete. And to me, that is a wonderful thing.
So it's interesting. So you've got the poker environment, which is highly competitive, right?
Right.
We're trying to take everybody's chips. Like we're trying to get every
Mhm.
single chip in play. Yet at the same time, it has this sort of unifying effect, which you're speaking to, which is interesting. Like you said, the World Series, and anywhere you go, you sit down and, there's people, some are gay, some are straight, some are black, some are white, some are Republican, some are Democrat,
Right.
but at the table, you're all just kind of
Poker players, right?
You're a poker player. And I think that is a beautiful sort of message of unity, even in the midst of, we're all trying to crush each other's souls and three-bet the heck out of people. So that's an interesting thing. Well, anyway, thanks for that. I'm going to shift gears a little bit just because we only have 7 hours with you. So we got to limit our time a little bit here. But anyway, I just wanted to start with that because that's been an important part of your story and an important part of my story as a growing as a human, as a poker player. Your story has intersected with that, and I've appreciated that greatly. But I want to kind of get back to, you being this young guy. You've got a lot of great results. You're a very smart guy. You could have done a lot of things with your life. And so I'm kind of curious, like how you got into poker and how you realized poker was like something you could do. Were you like this prodigy, or
no,
are you a student of the game, or like how did this even start?
So I started like most people around my age group with the Moneymaker boom. Okay. When Chris Moneymaker won, that was what, 2002, 3?
You might remember it. I have a bad memory. Well, see, you're Googling. See these millennials, they just Google it.
2003. Okay. So okay. Moneymaker won in 2003. So I was 13 at the time. And obviously that's like the start.
You're killing me, brother.
So obviously that's the start of like the Moneymaker boom. And when with the start of that, lots of kids my age in school were like into poker. We were watching it on ESPN. There was WPT on television as well. It was definitely like anytime that ESPN was like, showing the World Series, that they were launching new episodes, we would all be talking about it. And so when we would do like sleepovers and stuff, instead of just like playing football and, doing that kind of stuff, we were also, or like Halo or, playing video games and whatever, we were also just playing poker. Playing like, 1 cent, 2 cent, or 2 cent, 5 cent, and doing like $5 and $10 buy-in tournaments. And I was actually a fish in those games. I was bad. I was very bad. And, as I got older, I got more and more into competitive gaming. I played Halo somewhat competitively, a couple other games that I played at fairly high levels. And when I turned 18, or just before turning 18, I stumbled upon this little poker forum called 2+2 Forums. And the moment I started reading, information on there, learning that poker was, purely a game of skill, that there's math involved. I've always been kind of a math and logic oriented person. But once I learned like the type of math and thinking that went into the game, I immediately started turning into a winning player. And, I always needed some type of competitive outlet. And before poker, for me, it was competitive gaming. And once I got into poker and realized how much there was to learn about the game and how much money I could make playing it, that's when I switched my grind from being mostly video games to being mostly poker. I was playing micro stakes on Poker Stars and slowly grinding up bankrolls. And then I got my first backing deal when I was like 19 and pretty much never looked back.
So there was never a time in there where it's like, I'm going to go to college, get a real job. It was just kind of right from gaming into poker.
My year in college. So as I said before,
that's right. You went to UMD.
Yeah, I went to University of Minnesota Duluth. That was actually the year that the football team won the national championships when they had their undefeated season. So it was a pretty cool year to be there with the amount of hype around that. But my year there at school was spent hanging out with friends and playing poker. And actually the friends and stuff that I was hanging out with, we had started a student group. And through that student group, we also started poker leagues. So we had a like every Sunday, whatever poker league that ran for like, I think 3 to 4 months where the overall winner got X amount. And then on top of that, we were also like doing cash games and that kind of stuff. So essentially my entire year of college, instead of going to classes, I just played poker and hung out with friends and played live poker. And so I essentially went to school for what I do now.
Nice. Exactly. You went to school for poker. That's
exactly.
So that was primarily online then when you were playing. I mean, you're playing some of the small live stuff, but then at some point you transitioned to live. Was that a natural thing or was it intentional?
So I only more recently transitioned mostly to live. So after Black Friday hit, so April 2011, it was actually, I wasn't 21 yet. I was a month before turning 21. I was living in Wisconsin, living with family, and I when that hit, I didn't know what I was going to do because it was a month before I could even play live poker in Wisconsin. You had to be 21 to play live in Wisconsin since they didn't have, or at least at the non-Indian casinos. And I didn't know what to do. So I spent like 3 weeks killing time studying. And then I started playing live at a Potawatomi in Wisconsin, playing mostly 2-5 cash. And then so I thought that I wasn't going to do the World Series that year, but a buddy of mine approached me and was like, hey, I'm going to have like a spare bed in a hotel room. If you just want to stay with me for the length of the summer, you're more than welcome to split the hotel costs. And that way you can play a full summer package. And I was like, well, I guess I'm playing the World Series. So I sold a big package, and the first like 2-3 weeks went terribly. Like I went like 0 for 20, didn't even have a min cash, just straight brick. And obviously was getting like kind of disappointed. But then I finally got a min cash in. Little min cash, like a 1K. And then the very next tournament I played, I final tabled. And it was a $1,500 buy-in with a couple thousand entries. And first place was like $550,000. So at 21 years old, I'm playing on my first World Series final table for $550K.
Jeez.
And I went into the final table. I was 9 out of 9. And before we hit 8-handed, I was chip lead. So I went to 1 out of 9, and then I took 8th.
Keep your hands inside the car at all times.
Yep.
And we'll talk about that for a quick second. I know you're gonna, but I'm really curious about that. Like, were you hooked on live poker before the World Series, or was it just something to do? Did the World Series really just hook you, or were you already kind of like there?
I would say before really playing my first World Series scheduled, I was more of an online player.
Yeah.
But when I played that full schedule, I really enjoyed it. I just really, truly enjoyed it. But I didn't start to become more live focused until like 2 years ago. So I was still mostly an online grinder for the next 7 years. Mostly just because, when you play poker professionally, most of playing poker professionally is about putting in volume, especially as a tournament player. And realistically speaking, it is just way, way, way easier to play online volume than it is to play live volume. For live, even like the biggest grinders of the year, guys like Ari Angle is like one of the main names that comes to mind. Even he probably only plays like 250 to 350 entries in a year, which sounds like a lot, and it technically is a lot.
Right.
But when you're talking about the amount of variance involved in tournament poker, it really is very, very minor. Give you an idea. Over the course of my career, I've gone on many, many, many 1,000 plus game downswings. That's just normal. Losing money for 1,000 entries is normal. When you're talking about these really large fields and not very large edges, the variance is just really, really, really brutal. And because that's the case, that means it's kind of a necessity as a tournament player to play online. Or if you are playing a live focus schedule, that you do stuff like, when you're traveling to play live series, you're playing satellites, side events, main events, and cash games as a means to keep having income coming in. Because if you're not playing a ton of volume, then variance is just going to entirely dictate your year-to-year results, which is still honestly mostly going to be somewhat true for any tournament player. Unless you play a ridiculous amount of games online, your year-to-year profits are going to be dictated as much by variance as it is by your skill in any given event. Especially when you're talking about, even if you're someone like, say, a $50 average buy-in player who plays between like 22s and 200s, and, the top end of your buying range, those 200s, if they're only like 10% of your buy-ins, which is going to be pretty typical, but you just run very poorly in those and run very well in the 22s and run okay in the rest of the stuff, that could be the difference between you being plus 100 on the year or plus 50 on the year or plus 200 on the year. Let's say you make a major $215 buy, you final table Sunday Million, and the difference between 9th and 1st is like $150,000. That could be the difference of your whole year profits. And the fact that like tournaments are so heavily dictated by just year to year and just variance in general means that grinding online is by far the most consistent way to make a living. It just by far is. And because of that, that meant that the main way for me to easily be able to provide for myself and my family was to make sure that I was grinding online, which is why I spent essentially most of 2011 to 2015 outside of the US or just constantly traveling back and forth between Canada, the Midwest, Vegas, Mexico, you name it, just to make sure that I could keep playing good online volume. And now, once I moved to Vegas, so we moved to Vegas more officially, I want to say about 4.5 years ago. And once we moved here, it was much more realistic for me to be able to play some online and play mostly live and do things like coaching and other things as a means to supplement my income. Once I could supplement my income enough, then it became a lot more viable for me to be able to just do what I enjoy and hope I did well and, have enough income coming in from other stuff where if I did poorly playing tournaments, it wasn't going to really impact our lifestyle. We might not have as much as we would want, but we always got by essentially, even when I was running very poorly.
Right. I'm going to shift gears a little bit to talk a little more strategy on stuff.
Mm-hmm.
This is so good. I'm curious now. You've done I know you've done obviously a ton online, a ton live. You've done a lot of coaching, and now you got the new website, which we'll talk a bit about there. But I'm just kind of, most of our audience is recreational players, which means everything from people just playing bar leagues to people playing up to maybe 1,100 or so, somewhere in that range. So it's a wide swath, a lot of live players. And I'm curious now, as you've got this body of knowledge from working with so many people and all of the experience at the tables, like what are those biggest pockets of mistakes that you see most recreational players making? Like what are those 2 or 3 things that you're just like, this continues to be sort of one of the major division lines between the people that just can't get over the hump and the people that have made it over the hump?
I would say the most common mistake I see most players make is having a limping range in spots where they're never supposed to open limp ever. Ever open limp. Great example is just honestly 25 plus big blinds deep effective from cutoff or earlier. You just should never open limp ever. You could be the second limper. You can over limp, but you should never be the first limper ever in those spots. And even just having an open limping range, it weakens it. It causes so many issues in the way each of their other ranges look like in terms of opening, that they're just going to make such massive errors. And it's very easy for a professional to take advantage of someone who even has a limping range. And some of the people watching this who might say, hey, I can limp pretty well in some of these spots, it screws your ranges to such a ridiculous degree that unless you're a bot that can perfectly build this stuff out to a decent degree, it's just going to be incredibly difficult to make nearly as good of decisions as if you just had an opening range. One of the other issues is most people open way too tight, although it's not necessarily as big of a mistake because most people's post-flop games are incredibly weak. But if you have a solid foundation in your flop game, you should be very comfortable with opening close to what GTO suggests pre-flop. If you're very uncomfortable post-flop, then playing on the tighter side of things is very reasonable, as it gives yourself easier post-flop decisions. But that being said, if you're going to open tighter and you're going to 3-bet tighter, you also need to open larger. And you need to 3-bet larger as a general rule of thumb. Most recreational players 3-bet way too small. This is also one of, I would say, the third most common mistake that people make is their re-raise sizes pre-flop are way, way, way too small. Back in the day, people thought that by back in the day, I mean as early as the early 2000s and 10s, to the late 08, 09, 10, 11, 12, it was pretty common for there to be an open and then a 3-bet to let's say there's an open to 10, the 3-bet would be to between 22 and 27. And 27 would be a large 3-bet. These days, let's say there's an open to 10 and you're playing a 1-3 game and the typical open's to $10 and you're playing 500 effective. These days, a typical 3-bet would be at that stack depth would be to 35 in position and 50 out of position. And most people are still 3-betting between 25 to 30. And out of position, they might 3-bet to 30 to 35 instead of going to the 45, 50. You can even go larger in some of these spots, going as large as 60. So
does that
tournament
apply
days,
to tournaments as well as cash? Is that the same?
Yes, it definitely. If anything, it applies more so to tournaments because with tournaments, you generally have an ante, and the ante makes just gives the opener against a 3-bet much better odds to call. So them getting better odds means they're much more inclined to call, which means as a 3-better, you should be going larger to discourage their calls. Even if you have a very strong overall 3-bet range, your 3-bet range in general still just wants to put in a lot of chips, either to make sure you're not giving them good direct odds and implied odds, or just to build pot with your very strong hands. And your bluffs all want to go really large as well. So let's say you're playing 1-200 with a 200 ante, and you're playing 20K effective starting stack. So it's 100 big blinds deep, 1-2 with an ante. And the opener goes to 500 in mid position, and you have the button. Most people would 3-bet here to between like 12 and like 1,400, maybe going 1,500. When from a fundamental standpoint, you want to go minimum 1,500, but even going as large as 2,000 here is very reasonable. And if you're out of position, if you're the small blind or the big blind, you want to go at minimum 2,000, but going as large as like 2,500 to even 3,000 is very reasonable. So going 5 to 6x out of position when you're very, very deep, and going 3.5 to 4.5x in position when you are very deep. Now, the shallower effective you get, you can go smaller and smaller and smaller because your opponent's getting less direct odds and implied odds, most importantly. The implied odds that they get is a pretty important factor to what types of hands they can call with, because that generally just means overall odds they will be getting on various flop and turn decisions are drastically impacted by implied odds. So let's say you're playing that 1-200, but instead of 20K starting stack, it's 10K starting stack. So you're half as deep. Then when the open is to 500, the in position 3-bet can be to around 3x, so it can be to around 1,500. But the out of position 3-bet still needs to be about 4.5 to 5x, so 2,200, 2,500. And most people are 3-betting like 2.5 to 3x at most, not even counting the fact that they're out of position. So when I'm playing in these really soft live tournaments, so for instance, Win right now has a good series going on. They have a $400 100K, and then which I won't be able to play, busy with this today, but I'll be playing a 600 there Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 600, 250K. And chances are my starting table is going to have 1 to 2 like local pros of some kind that I noticed to a decent degree. Maybe 1 or 2 just like local regulars that can be of varying ability. And then there will be like 3 or 4 complete recreational players. And because people don't call correctly against opens, because they 3-bet either incorrectly or way too small or way too tight or both, and because they just defend very poorly, my early position opening range is going to be between 25 and 35% of hands in early position. And on the button, I'm generally going to be opening 100%. Cutoff, I'm generally going to be opening between 70 and 90%. And the thing is I could tell my table that I'm doing this and still mostly get away with it because they're going to adjust in the incorrect fashions. Most people, when they're dealing with this like hyper aggressive young player such as myself, they tend to just call too often.
Right.
They are going to like 3-bet me. They're going to 3-bet me way too tight and way too small. They aren't adjusting in anywhere near the correct type of fashion. And on top of that, the post-flop decisions they make such egregious errors that it doesn't even matter if their post-flop decisions drastically improve, or if their pre-flop decisions drastically improved against me. The errors they're making post-flop are so large that I can still get away with playing in this style to some degree. Obviously not to the same degree if they're 3-betting me well and loosening up a lot, but still to a decent degree. The issue with playing this style is that if you don't have an incredibly fundamentally strong post-flop game, and you don't know exactly how you're abusing your opponent's pre-flop and post-flop mistakes, it's going to turn into a very losing style. It really does require for you to have a very, very fundamentally strong game. And that's kind of like the whole point of why learning game theory optimal decision making in poker is very important. It's not so you can play like the robot. Your goal isn't to know what a GTO range is and then just follow it blindly. Because while that's better than not really having any foundation for your game, it's nowhere near as good as understanding how your opponents are deviating from this and what you can do to make the most out of it. Give you an idea, a GTO opening range in early position on 100 big blinds is 14% of hands. So and a reply to that opening range. So if I open an EP on 14% and it folds to the hijack, and I'm also in the hijack and I want to 3-bet myself, then I'm going to 3-bet to 3-bet around like 7 to 8% of hands. And not just percentage of hands that I choose, but the sizing that I choose and the frequencies that I choose each of these hands are very, very important in terms of making sure that I'm playing at a high level. I can't just like open a 14% range. I have to open the right type of 14% range and then 3-bet the right type of 3-bet range. And the reason why knowing these is important isn't so I can just follow it blindly. It's because when someone opens an early position and I go, what percentage of hands is this person opening? And they're opening 5%, then the reply to that means when I 3-bet them, I just have a strong value hand. And I just call a lot versus them. And when they're, instead of opening 14% in early position, they're opening 25%, like I try to get away with, then my reply to that is to 3-bet that person a lot more than 7%. Instead of just 3-betting them 7%, I'm going to 3-bet like 10% or 12%. And if someone's really trying to abuse, where they're opening, when I get kind of ridiculous and I'm opening 35%, then I should just be 3-betting them like 20% of hands or something like that. But what happens is most people, they just open way too tight. So then I get to 3-bet them strong linear for value. And when they 4-bet me, their 4-bet range is almost always just aces and kings. And I can just fold everything to the 4-bet. And I don't lose sleep over it. It's like, okay, you just had aces or kings. Sweet, great. Next hand.
3-bet again. Yep.
And the main reason why them like 3-betting way too tight is a monstrous error against a loose opener is mostly because poker is a game of equities, and poker is a game of equity denial. Like especially tournaments. Tournaments is all about equity denial. That is like just the nature of what the game really truly is at its core. It's purely about equity denial. Your goal is to get your opponent to make mistakes via not realizing the equity of their hands. So or just them just making those mistakes and you just taking advantage of it. Either or, picking up the dropped equity, or getting them to not realize the equity that they should have. So the way that I do a lot of this equity denial is I open really, really, really loose. And what I'm doing by opening super loose is most people, they're just going to 3-bet me with their 3-bet range. They're going to go, this kid's opening, this is what I need to 3-bet with. And they just have this in their mind of what they should be 3-betting. They just view hands as 3-bet hands or as calling hands. So to someone who's an okay 3-better, they're just going to 3-bet me 10s plus, ace queen plus, and then they might mix in a couple bluffs like an ace 5 suited, 9-8 suited type hands, and they'll just 3-bet me with that no matter what. And that's not an awful strategy, and it's an easy strategy, but what they're not realizing is by sticking to that strategy, which is too tight, and by also sticking to a pre-flop calling strategy that is also too tight, that I'm essentially picking up the equity that they're leaving on the table for me. So I'm just hoovering it up via opening super loose. And then for post-flop, the main mistakes that I take advantage of is when I c-bet, people continue way too tight versus it, but most importantly, they don't check raise anywhere near enough. So a typical check raise percent that most people are going to use as a total rule of thumb is going to be between like 3 and 5%, maybe like 6 as a general population average. And live poker is going to be closer to 3%. Online poker is going to be closer to 6%. The actual percentage that people should be 3-betting as an overall average is like 16 to 17%. And there are situations where they should be check raising closer to like 20 to 25%. Like button versus big blind specifically, there are lots of board textures where the big blind should be check raising closer to 20 to 25%. But early position versus big blind defend, they should only be check raising like 5 to 10%. So it's always situational based, it's always board texture based, it's always stacked up based, but all these factors can drastically impact these things. But the most important thing is when someone's supposed to check raise me 20% of the time, but they're check raising me 3% of the time, that means
you're printing
all
money.
Of these hands that I'm betting with that I'm not supposed to be able to bet with, I get to bet with, like these really non-equity hands, like just no backdoor hope and a prayer, just nothing, just absolute napkins. I get to bet it for a fifth pot or a quarter pot, and they make money because my opponent could call me perfectly, But if they're check raising at 3% when they're supposed to check raise at 20%, that means I get to bet with a napkin profitably, like actual zero equity. I get to bet and make money on it. And that's where I make money and where most pros make money. We're not making money because, we're playing the game at this theoretical perfect level or because we're geniuses or anything like that. It's because our opponents make massive mistakes. And the better you understand the way the theory works, you have a better idea as to what types of mistakes someone is making. If you don't know what a baseline decision is, then how do you know if someone's too tight or too loose in a spot?
Right.
What do you base that on? Too tight, too loose compared to what? Like, they're really, when you don't have any true ideas what theory looks like. Now, I'm not saying that I or anyone even knows truly what GTO looks like. We don't. We honestly, we have a vague inkling of what it could be based off of what information we currently have. Even our closest guess to GTO was the heads up bot that beat the one that actually beat them, not the one that statistically beat them, the one that actually ran profitable, that was built on this super high end learning software. The thing took a supercomputer, like an actual true supercomputer, to operate and run. That might be our best guess as to what GTO looks like. And that thing just played itself infinite hands. The calculators and stuff that we have current access to, they're just that. They're calculators. And they're very limited by the amount of technology that we currently have to operate them. So give you an idea, the way these calculators work is, let's say you put in an opening range, you put in a defend range, and then you put in a flop. And then on the flop, you want the opening range to have different bet sizings. Right now, the bet sizings that you can do, let's say you did 3 flop sizings, and then 3 turn sizings and 3 river sizings, a small, medium, and large size for each, plus then checking as well. That means you have 4 trees for each decision point. You have 4 flop decisions, check, small, medium, large, 4 turn, check, small, medium, large, and then 4 river, check, small, medium, large. So then you get to the river with 4 times 4, and then those get split into 4 extra ranges. So you getting to the river with 64 different trees, 64 trees that are possible. It's just 4 times 4, and then those 16 total ranges, check, X, so on and so forth. Super simple math. Just 4 times 4 is 16 ranges that get to the river that get split into 4 different decisions points. So that's 64 total trees, which sounds like a lot. And it actually technically is, because you're not just splitting you're splitting your entire range of decisions. So let's say the opening range was 15% of hands. That's 160 some unique combinations that you're splitting into 64 different decision paths. And that's why these calculators are so powerful, but also very limited, because 64 trees, while it sounds like a lot and it sounds very complex, and it is to a human brain, to like in the terms of what actual GTO should be. So what GTO should be is, we don't just have 3 sizings, we have infinite sizings for every decision point. Every decision point should have unlimited sizings. But let's say we didn't even do unlimited, because doing unlimited is kind of pointless. You did like near unlimited, which is just like you split big blinds into like decimals, like a quarter of a big blind or whatever, to every one. Then on the flop, you could bet anything between the stone minimum, which would be 1 big blind, all the way up to whatever all in would be, and every single 1/4 increment in between. So then you'd need 400 different. If you're playing 100 big blinds deep, you need 400 flop decisions. Then you need 300 to 400 turns, and then that would get split into anywhere between 100 to 400 river decisions, right? Which means that would be it'd be
tens of millions.
It'd be like 16 million different trees. To me, that's how far away we are from true GTO. We're even getting I think getting kind of close would be 20, 20, and 20. I think that would be close enough to GTO that we could have a pretty good idea as to what's happening for the most part. That's 80,000 trees. So right now, let's say I were to pull up PioSolver. And so through the group that I work with, that I'm back and do coaching and stuff for, we have a server set up. Most professional either pros or organizations or groups or whatever, we rent these servers that are really, really, really powerful to be able to run these programs. So this server has like 128 gigabytes of RAM. So it's really, really powerful, really high-end server. Lots of cores, all that stuff. And if I were to do a 3, 3, and 3, or sorry, so 3 sizing, so 4, 4, and 4, so 64 total decisions by the river. If I were to put that into PioSolver and to run it, and also I would have the out of positions check raise decisions. So it's technically a lot more than that, but we'll just ignore that. To run this, which I think it's pretty complex and it is pretty difficult for the computer to run this. It'll take like 4 to 6 hours for this high-end server, something like that. And if I were try to do what I would want to be able to do, the 20, 20, and 20, it would take, I don't know, a year longer.
Right,
It'd take very, very long. It'd be 15, or it would be it'd be like 1,500 times longer than that.
Yeah.
So it takes 6,000 hours to run. It would take.
It reminds me of my corporate world days. I used to do stochastic analysis, and we do that on, to do our capital markets hedging stuff, and it'd be stochastic on stochastic on stochastic, and literally you need the answer on what derivative should I buy. You need to know the answer in 15 minutes, and it would take you 12 hours to run the program. So a little bit of an issue, and so kind of the same thing here. The human brain. Okay, here's my decision point. I'll get back to you in 8 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
Unfortunately, we don't have that much time at the table.
So these calculators, while they are super powerful, they're also very limited. So when people are worried about these like calculators taking over, whatever, it's not really a true worry. And really these things, they're very cool tools that give us a vague insight into how these things should look. And the thing is while it only gives us a vague insight, the human brain comparatively is so simple that very few people play remotely close to even how a 4-decision tree should look like.
Right.
Very, very few. The only person that might come like remotely close is going to be someone like Limitless or like Badziakowski or Bonomo, or like some of the absolute best players on the planet might get a little bit close to it. And everyone else is just nowhere near. Like I am nowhere near.
So touch on that a little bit. So touching on that a little bit, kind of like just we hear this, we're like, as a recreational player, we're like, oh my God, I know that's out there, but I know we have to translate that just into basic concepts. So talk a little bit about how do we not get intimidated by that? I mean, because we know I'm not going to be playing up, against Bond or you or Fedor Holtz very often unless, we just happen to stumble upon the same tournament, but I listen to them like, oh man, and maybe I have no hope at learning the game, but maybe just talk a couple minutes on, okay, so as a recreational player, what do I take away from that then? Are there concepts, are there principles?
Right.
What do I do if I am not going to be renting PioSolver, to figure out, what my 3-bit range should be, or, help us out, kind of translate that into everyday Joe.
That's one of like the best things about the game, and also how good the human brain is at turning broad concepts into easily definitive and learnable things. Like, for instance, something like, let's say I told you to drive to Target and buy, a loaf of bread. Like, that's something that honestly to us is very simple because, we're adults. We've got our driver's license. We have a vehicle. We've, know how money works, all these things. When you're like a 3-year-old or 5-year-old kid or whatever, if I told them to do that, they just wouldn't have a vague idea as to what I'm talking about, and if you really think about it, even something like that is arguably a very complex series of events. First of all, you need to know how to drive a car. You need to know where Target is. You need to know how to operate the vehicle. You need to know what money is, how money works, how to use it, how to access it. And then you need to go through the process of entering the store. And then when you enter the store, even just entering the store, your brain is inundated with all these different decision points. All the advertising that's thrown at you, just every single, just getting to there, you have infinite decisions that your mind is making. But to you, it's something, what you're doing. It's very simple. Like, as a total broad concept, if you think about it, it is very, very in-depth and complex. And throughout the course of making those decisions and getting to the point of actually having the bread, going back, coming home, it is ridiculously complex, way more complex than, some simple poker decision. But the thing is our brains are very, very good at going, oh, it's instead of all these infinite decisions, it's okay, I'm going to leave my house, I'm going to get in my car, I'm going to drive to the Target, I'm going to get the type of bread that I normally get, I'm going to spend money on it and come home. And you turn something that is ridiculously complex into something that is incredibly simple. Like, if your wife told you to go get bread, you'd go get the bread, and on the way you'd be like, do you need anything else? And then you'd come home, and that'd be it.
Right.
It's simple, it's easy. But honestly, you just need to turn poker into that. And that's the difficult thing, is how do you turn poker into that? Well, there are a lot of different ways you can do it. You can join training sites and study and learn and read all the books.
Is there a training site that you know
poker.
That might
Exactly.
be Learn Pro Poker.
So one of the things is, what these tools do is it helps people like me who have the time and inkling and effort and passion to grind them and study them and try to figure out what it's telling me. And then I am friends with a lot of other people who are very good at this stuff, or even way better than me, ridiculously better than me. Some of them are. So then I go to them and go, hey, I don't really understand what it's telling me here. What do you think it is? And then we discuss it and debate it and, use other tools to try to figure out what it's trying to tell us. And then, I've been coaching and playing the game for, I've been playing the game professionally for, I guess, almost 11 years now. And I've been coaching the entire length of it. And I've coached players of all abilities. So I essentially go to this person or go to the calculator and I learn what concept it's trying to teach me. And then I just simplify it. And all of these concepts can, for the most part, be simplified to a reasonable degree, where someone who just has the desire and passion to learn can do so. You might not be able to compete against the absolute elite players exactly on their level, but you can get good enough where they're not going to completely and totally crush you. And that's the amount of information that's available and is easily accessible these days. Most of the other training sites that teach GTO-based concepts and theories, they're pretty expensive. Sites like, Run It, even like Run It Once, $100 a month is still on the more expensive side, although you get a very large database of information. But like Upswing, their most recent tournament course, I think, is like $1,000 or $1,200. Raise Your Edge is also like $1,400 or $1,200. And then Fedor's recent poker code is also like $1,400. So there's a lot of like really good information out there that's also really expensive. And then you have sites like Run It Once and similar style sites that have these large databases of videos with a lot of information. A lot of it is very, very good, but waiting between the good information and bad information can be very difficult, especially because a video that is as new as 2 years old can have information that is very, very wrong in it, or information that is just not anywhere near close to correct to be very useful. And on top of that, when you go to a site like that, you also get a lot of conflicting information. You'll have players of different calibers telling you different things.
Right.
And some of it might be very good and useful for you in particular, and some of it might not be, and you're not going to be able to tell the difference between it. And that's like one of the biggest issues with the inundation of information that's available these days, is there's a lot of just not very good information that's out there. And some of the information that is confirmably very good is also very, very, very expensive, which is why I wanted to make Learn Pro Poker. It's because I wanted there to be good information that was well edited, well produced, that was well structured, that was easy for someone to go through, find what they wanted to work on, and work on that one specific concept. So I've broken the site down into easy to use concepts. And any of the more broad theory things that I find to be very important, and do super basic, straightforward videos and teach you and walk it through step by step by step by step. And because it's just me making the content, I'm not beholden to making X length of videos. I'm not beholden to making X number of videos per week or whatever. So when I'm making a video, it's because I think it has information that is worth learning and that it is useful. And that's why the videos on there take a lot of work by me. So most of the theory videos on there, they're between 3 minutes and 14 minutes. I wanted to make the videos super accessible, easy to watch for pretty much anyone. And because they're on the more short side of things, that also means that I need to fill them with good information. So there's no filler, there's no random BS. It's just straightforward, to the point, good information, which means that I spent many hours per video prepping that information, writing it, editing it down, rewriting it, and making it cover all the information that I wanted it to cover without just extra stuff in there. So that means any of the longer videos, it's generally about 3 hours per minute of work. So a 10-minute video is going to be 30 plus hours of work for me on that specific video. And that might not even count the work I'm doing ahead of time into it to prepare the video. Like I might spend 50 to 100 hours studying a concept better. So then I can spend another 30 hours to make the video itself. So I try to make the content as accessible as possible. And like, while it is in depth and it is all very GTO based, because I spent so many hours coaching and working with players of all abilities and all levels of knowledge and everything, that I've done my best to simplify it as much as possible. So it's the best information I possibly have, simplified as much as I can make it.
It reminds me of, I think Abraham Lincoln was credited with saying, I wrote you a long letter because I didn't have time to write you a short letter. It's kind of one of those things, right? It takes longer to make a smaller or shorter video.
Right, to simplify the concepts and theories and make them easily accessible. That's usually what I'm spending the most time on. Because we also do a lot of visual aids. And while I just do basic examples of it, any of the visual aids that we have on there have been worked over by our editor, who has a video marketing degree. So our full-time editor is an actual professional with videos, with design work, and then we'll outsource stuff as well to make sure that it is of high quality. So, one of my biggest issues with some of the other sites that are out there is you can tell that the pros are just phoning it in. They're not passionate about it. They're not getting paid anywhere near enough. I've made videos for Run It Once. I know how much they pay, and you do it more because you enjoy it and because you want to be associated with them, not because of the massive amounts of money they're paying you. And even something like Upswing. Upswing paid Petrangelo a lot of money, but you can tell that he did it because he got paid a lot of money, not because he wanted to make the content. And I really enjoy teaching and making this content. I enjoy helping people get better. One of my good friends and Learn Pro Poker members a couple days ago, let's see, I guess it would have been, about a week ago, he won a circuit ring and $215,000. And, helping someone achieve a dream and a goal of his and giving him helping him achieve a $215,000 score, that's why I do this stuff. And, helping other, when I make this content, I'm thinking back to when I was a 18-year-old kid living in Brainerd, Minnesota, who had a dream of playing at the World Series. And I want that person to be able to access my content, afford it, learn it, use it, and become a professional if that's what their goal is. Or if their goal is to just get a little bit better so they can crush their friends in home leagues and bars, then by all means, it's accessible and useful even for that. Because while I teach the GTO, I also teach you how to apply it in real situations, teach you the types of mistakes that people make, why these are mistakes, and then how we take advantage of it. And that's like my goal with, when I'm teaching, not just, hey, turn you into a robot and get better, but teach you how to think about and approach the game. And I don't expect people to play the same style as I do or to all of a sudden become these super loose, hyper aggressive players, but to just think better about the game. That really is always my goal at the site, is to help people think better about poker.
And this is pretty good timing because it's Cyber Monday and there's a deal going on today.
Yes.
So you guys, it's $30 a month now on special. Yep. Rather than $40 a month, it's $305 for an entire year, right?
If it ends in 7 hours and 32 minutes.
7 hours. So what time is that actually?
11:59 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Pacific Time. So you got till 2 a.m. Tuesday here, folks in Minnesota. Yep. But you can get out there. You go to learnpropoker.com directly. If you want to also support Rec Poker, we have a link to as an affiliate. We can go to rec.poker/help.
For all just using their link, they get a credit for it for the life of your account. So you can just consistently help them via using their links. So definitely do so.
Well, I appreciate that. So we're rec.poker/LPP if you want to do the rec poker thing. But Ryan, I know you don't have a lot of time left. We've taken a lot of your time, but we had some questions from some of our
Yep.
listeners. Are you willing
Fire
to
away.
a
Let's turbo
shotgun?
go through them.
We'll have to go through them pretty quick.
Yep.
But this first one's actually a little bit longer of a question, but you can do your best to answer pretty quickly. So
Yep.
Danny Schneider, who I actually just played with today, he said, one of the things that he works on is trying to figure out how do I work through tournaments that have fast blinds, which is normally what a lot of us recreational players play. It's 5-hour tournament kind of thing. So he has an approach where he kind of has this top 5 question strategy approach that he asks himself on a regular basis. So he just kind of wants you to evaluate this and maybe give him some insight. So the questions that he asked himself, what is my chip stack versus the average stack? In other words, can I be patient or do I have to make a move to stay ahead of the blinds? Is the table playing loose or tight? And I try to play the opposite of the current game style. What's the minimum blind raise sizing? Let's see. What minimum blind raise sizing does it take to get other plays out of the hand? What player should I try to exploit? And what player should I try to avoid? So that's kind of what he asks himself. So maybe you can opine on that.
Those are pretty reasonable questions. The stacked depth is one of the most important things because stacked depth pretty much entirely dictates your opening range. Something that most people don't realize is in tournaments and just in actually in all versions of the game, really. But for the most part, the shorter effective you are, the looser you can open. Most people think it's the opposite of that. They think the deeper you are, the looser you can open. But really, it's the shallower you are because as you get more and more shallow, your high Broadway hands go way up in value. So King 10 off at 100 big blinds in early position, absolute trash, just muck it.
Yep.
But King 10 off at 30 big blinds in early position, that's an open. That's generally going to be an open because, on 30 bigs or less, if you flop top pair, that's a good hand. You don't have a lot of, your stack to pot ratio is very small, so you can open looser. So making sure you're opening loose enough is honestly one of the most important things to make sure you're doing relative to stack depth. We're at relative to money. That's the only time I really think about my stack depth relative to other players. Isn't necessarily, am I above or below average? I don't really care about that. But I care about that if I'm nearing the money and I'm well below average, but I can cash a high percentage of the time. So will bubbling this tournament massively affect me? Generally, the shorter effective you are, the more likely you are to cash, the more the bubble matters. The deeper effective you are, the more you're just trying to accumulate, punish the bubble, and try to go for, building a top 3 victory. Playing tournaments isn't always about winning. It's always about making the best financial decision that you possibly can. And sometimes the best financial decision you can means you tank as hard as possible and you go for that min cash. So thinking in terms of that will drastically help him out. Also, an easy way to get way better at turbo tournaments is get the program Snapshove by Max Silver. It is a Nash-based mathematic calculator that shows you what different ranges look like based off the situation. Has a really good quiz program built in. It's like $10 a month and worth every cent if you play a lot of shorter stack tournaments.
All right, good stuff. Bao Vang asked, what are your thoughts on rec players transitioning from the daily turbo tournaments to multi-day? Like, what are the major things that should be incorporated?
Honestly, really just getting a better overall feel of medium and deeper stack opening ranges, really, and 3-bet ranges and things like that. So just getting a better idea as to what deeper stack ranges should look like. Just being more willing to be patient and not really think about, how long you're there for or how long it's been since you've gotten X hand, but instead just focusing on decisions. When you're playing these turbos and these daily things, you're kind of just playing to win, trying to have fun and that kind of stuff, which is very reasonable. And, people even do that in the multi-day stuff too. But I would say as you make the transition to playing more and more seriously, then your focus should be less and less about making money and having good results and more about making good decisions and improving and working on your game. Really, that's like the best thing is that if you want to play more seriously and get better, you need to care less and less about the results and care far more about how well of decisions you're making, what your opening ranges look like and calling ranges and 3-bet and check raise and all this stuff that I've been talking about the entire time, that you actually know why you do everything that you do. And if you can't prove to yourself or prove to someone else why you do something, chances are you need to study it way better. So that's the main thing I would say is study a lot and just work hard on improving your game at and away from the table. That's what you can do.
Great advice. And now here's a series. Some of these questions are from Chad McVean, who's another one of our Canadian fans. I think there's only two people that live in Canada, and they're both part of the Rec Poker podcast. So, but here you go. So these will have to be pretty quick answers. Chad asked if you're still associated with chip leader coaching, and how much did working with Chance help your game?
So chip leader coaching is kind of like wrapping up business. They still do some stuff, but there's really only like, I think just Chance and one other person left with it. So I'm no longer working with them, but working with Chance and like that group of coaches. So all the coaches in it, we had a just group chat where we'd all discuss hands, and, players like Joe McKeon and Ryan Lang and Simon Denman and Daniel Strelitz, Chance himself, Alex Foxen. We'd all just be sending hands and talking and discussing pretty regularly, and getting their input on decisions was definitely a very cool aspect of it, and definitely something that a lot of members that were in the site didn't really take advantage of. Through CLC was really a very cool idea, and had a really interesting business plan. But unfortunately, finding the right type of people to really take full advantage of it was a lot harder than what Chance and John, the founders, thought it would be, which is unfortunate, because I really loved it. I loved the idea of it. I liked everything behind it. It just ended up not really working out, unfortunately.
Okay. You're a proven winner at both No Limit Hold'em and PLO. Does playing one help the other, and do you recommend playing multiple variants?
Yes, definitely. So if you enjoy playing other game types, I cannot more strongly encourage you to keep doing so and try to slowly improve at each one. Now, the issue of, slowly learning each other game is that if you try to learn them too evenly, then you'll just become like a jack of all trades and a master of none, quote unquote. Yep. So generally what you want to do is you want to have one game that you're heavily focused on in terms of really improving, and then a bunch of other games that you're slowly learning on the side. Because as you get really good at that one game, it'll actually help you get better at the other games a lot faster. Just the better understanding you have of the general theories that go into playing poker. Like, all the games technically work around the same concepts and theories. It's, about three main things. It's about range and range advantage. It's about position, and it's about equity and equity denial. If you are very good at those three things, and you understand just the general structure of play of each of the games, then you'll play them at a way higher level than if you don't understand those three main concepts to an extreme in-depth degree. And it's much easier to understand them at one game type and then add them to the other games, versus not really learning that at all in any of them. So I would say definitely yes, but you want to focus on one.
Awesome. One last question there. We can't get to all of them. But Chad also said this as more of a compliment / question, I guess. But he says there's a lot of trash talk in poker Twitter. Maybe you've heard one or two. How do you maintain such a positive presence? Chad's very active on Twitter, and he says, I've not heard a negative thing said about you. So how do you do it?
So when I was a younger lad, I got a lot more into those ego wars.
Okay, the 12-year-old says when I was a younger lad. Okay.
Yeah. But when I was younger, I would ego battle and that type of stuff with people all the time, do these chat wars and whatever bullshit. And there wasn't anything productive about it. And I wasn't getting anything from it. It'd make me feel better about running bad or whatever BS, but it wouldn't, it wasn't a positive thing at all. And, when I stopped focusing on my results and started focusing about just who I was as a player and as a person, then it became much easier for me to just ignore most of that stuff. I'm still willing to call people out on their stuff, but I'm going to call them out on being unethical, about, supporting shitty companies, about stealing money or lying to people or stuff like that. That I will always publicly call people out on their shit. And I think it's really important that we as a community are willing to do that. It's so easy in poker for someone to build a brand and a name and then to use that to just take advantage of people. And that stuff I'm willing to go to war and throw down over. But, if it's about someone being, a bad player or whatever, I'm not going to, call them out or say anything about it or whatever, really. I think it's far more important to just focus on yourself and focus on becoming a better person and player than it is about, some ego war with someone.
Yeah. I was giving a sigh of relief that you weren't going to call me out for being a bad player. So I was very relieved to hear that. Well, that's great. No, I think that's a great credit to who you are as well. I mean, Chad is very active in the poker community and stuff too. And he's that's an important question from him. So, all right, we'll wrap up here. I know we're at time. We said 45. You said you'd give us more. We took it. We grabbed hold of it like a dog with a bone. Jim, did you have anything you wanted to add in there?
Only that my name's not in my Twitter handle, but Ryan and I have discussed several hands over the years, and I've always found him to be extremely welcoming and engaging and open-minded, willing to share, very generous with his time and his expertise, and that is, he's a great follow. So Potential MN, if you're not following him already, you really must. And I love this new format you're using to describe hand histories where you go sort of threading street by street with the results. I'd love to know another time when we have more time, I'd love to talk to you more about that format and how effective you found it to be. But thanks for coming. This has been great.
Thanks for having me. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. So any last comments or make sure everybody knows where to find you? You got so Potential MN is sort of your personal Twitter, and then Learn Pro Poker is the business one. Do you have one or favorite over the other, or should people just follow both? Or
just follow both. Learn Pro Poker account's more about just like site updates and company updates and things like that. Speaking of which, so tonight you got a bit over 7 hours to get into our last second deal for Cyber Monday. $30 a month. We're normally $40 a month, so you get $10 off a month. And if you sign up for that $30 a month, you will keep it for the life of the account. And we're also doing a yearly special that's $25.40 a month.
It's like $305, right, for the year?
Yeah, if you $305 for the year. So if you sign up for the year and you keep that, you will keep it for the life of the account. So when we're doing these deals, they're not just for a month or for X. You can get them for the life of the account. And one of the other reasons why you're going to want to sign up today is we are doing a $10,000 buy-in main event competition. Where the winner will get a stake into a $10,000 buy-in event this summer in Las Vegas. We are not associated with Caesars or WSOP in any way, shape, or form, but it is to a $10,000 buy-in event this summer in Las Vegas. And it comes with $1,000 of travel money. And the stake will not just be some piddly stake. It will be straight 50-50 stake. So we will essentially buy you in at 2.0 markup, type of markup that is saved for elite professionals. Essentially, that's it. So if you cash for $15,000, you pocket $7,500 straight up. And in order to compete, you just need to be a paying member of Learn Pro Poker. And that competition is starting this Thursday is the very first event. The way the competition works is we're doing 5 months of leagues. So going back to my days of playing college poker with my friends, we're bringing that back. The top 20 qualifiers each month will qualify into the finals. So we'll have 5 months of leagues where top 20 qualify. Can't qualify twice, so there will always be 100 total qualifiers. 100 total qualifiers will play a weekend of tournaments in May. It'll just be 4 tournaments that they'll play over a weekend. The top 8 will make the finals, and the winner will get the stake. So we're making it a skill-based competition where pretty much anyone can compete pretty easily. Should be very easy to qualify if that's your desire. And the way we're doing the games is we're doing the games Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, and Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday night. So 4 nights a week, and it'll shift week to week for the time zone. So I think they'll start at like 4 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Eastern. So it'll shift week to week. And, that way it's pretty easy for pretty much anyone to be able to participate. And chances are, even if you can only participate half the time, you should be able to qualify if that's what your goal is. So if you ever had a dream of playing in a $10,000 buy-in event, I think we're making that very, very accessible. And that's pretty much it. Something else to come with the site that the reason why I'm busy and going to be done with this in a sec is when you do become a member, you get access to our weekly group coaching sessions. They're 2-hour-long coaching sessions where people send in, questions and hands and whatever. And I give full in-depth, no holds bar review. And, it's not just a webinar. It's not just covering whatever. It's direct interaction with me, 2 hours in length. And if you can't attend them in person, you can email me questions and hands ahead of time, and I will answer them, during it, and it gets recorded and uploaded to the site. So very easy way to get full access to me. And the competition, I think, is a really cool thing. We're the only training site that's ever offered something like this. And I really think it's a cool way to help others achieve a goal like that, playing an event like that, competing at that level, and making it very accessible as well. So thank you very much for having me on. I really do appreciate it. I had a wonderful time and can't wait for the next time to be on.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely have you on again if you're willing, Ryan. So you can
definitely.
We got a few things we got to take care of. Housekeeping. You're willing to you can stay on if you want, or just sign off there. But we'll be in touch either way. But thank you again, Ryan. Thanks, Jim Reed, for jumping on here. A reminder: this Wednesday, 2 days from now, 6:30 p.m. Central Time. If you're a member of the Rec Poker community, you can join us for one of our great hand history discussions. We have a great time talking through hands that have been recorded and kind of breaking those down, and that is recorded and made back available to members. And then 8 o'clock Central is our home game, PokerStars home game. All the details on that, rec.poker/home game, and you can get all the information on how to sign up to be part of that PokerStars group and win some fabulous prizes. We give away 3 copies of the Andrew Brokus book, Playing Optimal Poker. Andrew's been nice enough to donate prizes for the 3 winners each month through the rest of 2019. So this is the last chance to win that. But just go to rec.poker. Everything is out there. If it's not out there, reach out to me or whoever that you know that's involved with Rec Poker, and we can answer any of the questions. If you want to do us a favor and you want to get a part of Learn Pro Poker, if you want to get into that membership Ryan was talking about, go to rec.poker/LPP or just find it in the menu. And you can use that link to sign up for his site that actually supports us as well, because we are an affiliate of Ryan. But if you want to do us more favors, like us, rate us, review us on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, wherever you're listening or watching this, that would be great. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell whoever you want. Let other people know about us. But special thanks again to our official sponsor, Running Aces Racetrack and Casino, as well as our newest sponsor, Learn Pro Poker. So with that, we will sign off. Thanks, Jim. We'll touch base with you soon. All right, everybody, take care.